Sup, welcome back to the channel. Australia beat England at home, and I was at the game. Interesting affair for sure, high scoring affair, I think one for the neutral. It was an excellent game to watch. I think being at the game kind of really showed a different atmosphere from what was going on with the New Zealand game, and I think it's a bit of a larger talking point that England fans in general are fickle. If they perceive that the opposition that they're playing against is of a very high quality, such as New Zealand or South Africa or Ireland or France, the crowd turns up in a big way. For example, last week we saw the haka, big response by the crowd singing Sweet Low during that. But because it was Australia, I just felt being within the stadium that it was a banana skin game for England. The crowd was a little bit like drunk and incoherent. Like there wasn't a huge kind of backing for the England team like there was last weekend. And I definitely think that played into part of the result that happened here. If we're talking about kind of the overall atmosphere, now let's talk more about what happened within the game. So first off, I want to say full credit to Australia. Joe Schmidt, I think, has really turned this team around in a short space of time. And I think he's on track to at least have a team that can be competitive against the Lions next year. Quote me on this, next year when we get there, maybe the Lions lose the tour in the end because, you know, that's just how Northern Hemisphere goes. But I am going to say Joe Schmidt, I think, did an excellent job in this game in terms of the development of the team through the Rugby Championship to this point forward. I think the big difference between what Australia was doing in its first tests against Wales since Joe Schmidt took over to what it's doing now is an attack. They're playing off 9 rather than playing off 10. For those of you that are a bit more keen-eyed, you probably noticed this yourselves. This is something that is popularised mainly by France. Obviously, Anton Dupont is in that team, and so it obviously makes a huge amount of sense to play off 9 rather than 10. Even though they have Untermack in there at that 10 shirt, who is, you know, probably one of the best 10s in the world, Dupont is just that much better. And there are advantages and disadvantages playing off the 9. Advantages: you don't have to pass it to a 10 who then has to make a decision on what happens with the attack. It can be a lot quicker. The scrum half can decide we're just going to go with the forwards and then we're going to go to the backs. It can kind of cut out a lot of the time required to get an attack going. And I think we saw that today. I think Australia in total made about 13 line breaks today against England's team. And I think there are comments that England's defence wasn't as good as it has been in previous games. But I definitely think that amount of line breaks is probably due to playing off of 9 and getting the ball out quickly, whether it's forwards in first or if it's getting it out to the backline, to the backs. And I think Jake Gordon is really, really good. And I think when Tay McDermott came on, he kind of just elevated that even more. You know, he's probably a little less good at passing than Jake Gordon, a little less experienced, but he's just quicker. Like, he's just faster, and he exploited those bits of gaps that were in the England defence towards the end of the game. And full credit to Australia. Eventually, they just kept hammering it home, and they scored a try in the corner with Max Jorgensen, who I'm also a big fan of. Talking about this Australia team in general, I think if you look from 1 to 15 here, I don't think you have to squint too hard to realise there's some real talent coming through this team. Just looking at here, Angus Bell, great loose head. I would, if he was an English player, I would be playing at loose head for England. Tupou as a tight head. He's like built to play tight head. Look at his size. The only problem is he gets injured every now and again. I just feel like because he's got a big frame and he's got a lot of muscle on there, literally looks like the perfect tight head and plays well in the scrum as well as the loose. Second rows, Nick Frost I like a lot. I thought Jeremy Williams had a good game. Rob Valentini, obviously a big dude. Fraser McWright, very good. Harry Wilson, very good. You know, and I think you look at the rest of this team as well. I've already talked about Jake Gordon. I think the centre partnership of Ikitau and Suia was very good. Kenaway, Wright and Peach, I'm big fans of those. And I'm going to talk about, obviously, Sualia's first game at Rugby Union, which was very good in a bit. But I'm just having a look at this entire team, and I'm just looking from like 1 to 15, and everything's great, right? I'm a huge fan of Tom Wright. I've said this leading up to the 2023 World Cup. Callaway is getting better and better. I wasn't his biggest fan, but I think the last few games in Australia shirt, he's really come of age, played well. I've always liked Dylan Peach as well. I think he's an excellent runner of the ball, and he's always right in the right place at the right time in both attack and defence. You notice there's a position I'm missing out of here, and it's Noah Lolasia, who is good. He's good. He's okay. But there's a reason that I think that Australia went from playing off of 10 at the beginning of the Rugby Championship to now when they're deciding to play off 9. And I just feel like they're missing that superstar CEO kind of 10 in that position to really just boss the entire attack from start to finish. Lolasia did everything that was asked of him today. He kicked some insane kicks off the tee in terms of like the difficulty of them. Cannot discredit it for him. But you can tell that the attack is taken out of his hands when Australia are on the go. Everything is decided by 9. And I think that was a a purposeful decision because I think towards the beginning of the Rugby Championship, I definitely felt like Australia's attack was lacking when it was going through 10. It just leads me to think, if Australia had peak Stephen Larkham or they had peak Gwade Cooper right now, I think this team could compete with anybody. Like, I genuinely think they're that good. Like, the talent they've got coming through, the question mark with such a loose team like this is, like, do they do the tight stuff well? But they really held up in the scrum and the line-out yesterday. They were great. But they can counter-attack it anywhere on the pitch. Like, they have the players for it. And they showed it today. Like, I genuinely feel like they are just one superstar 10 away from, like, having a really interesting Lions tour next year. But let's keep it to this game and let's give credit where credit's due. They played excellently today. Defensively, attackingly, they took the opportunities that were there for them, and I think they fully deserved the win. There's nothing to take away from them in that regard. That was Australia. I'm going to take a look at England on this. I think England played pretty badly, I'll be honest with you. I think it was mistake after mistake. I think they fumbled over themselves. And I was talking about the atmosphere and the ground, and the crowd wasn't fully behind them. And I felt they just fell into the trap of this being a bit of a banana skin game. Talking to the people that I went to the game with, the thing that I mentioned first of all is this is generally where England trip over themselves. When they play a team that, you know, they're high odds to beat, they either make it very close and they win, or they lose and there's a lot of soul searching on what's going on. And that's what happened today. Tons of mistakes across the pitch, you know. I don't think really anyone had an absolutely outstanding game. Maybe there's a couple in there like Maro Itoje, I think, played well, George Martin played well, Ollie Lawrence played well, but I think on the whole, the team just was a little bit incoherent. No one took the game by the scruff of the neck. And I just think, yeah, it wasn't great. I mean, what was this whole Lawrence going at 13 and Slade going at 12? The main reason that I thought they did it pre-game was for Suia coming in for his first game at Rugby Union, coming from Rugby League. I thought, Lawrence, bigger guy, maybe they're just using him to target him. But if you look on the defensive set pieces, like lineouts and scrums, Lawrence moved back into that 12 shirt and Slade played 13. So I don't know, maybe the whole point of it was just off of first phase attack, Slade was at that 12 shirt rather than Lawrence. Maybe they were looking for like a high ball that they could do from 12, from set pieces. But it was never there. I honestly felt like all of England's set piece moves from scrum, line out, felt unimaginative, felt like, you know, was clunky. That was when actually Australia scored their second to last try, which put them back into the lead and put a lot of pressure on England, was a messed up set piece move where Ollie Lawrence, one of his few mistakes in the game, drops the ball and Kellaway takes it to the other length of the pitch. It was just a bit sloppy. It wasn't good. And I think there's got to be a lot of soul searching. Unfortunately for Borthwick, as I've talked about with my commenters in previous videos, it turns next week into a must-win game against the best team in the world. And then if you lose next weekend, which are probably more than likely you will, I think honestly Borthwick gets about 2 or 3, if Borthwick has 2 or 3 losses in the Six Nations next year, in the next Six Nations, he could be gone. Not my preference. I don't think that's the way it should go. I think he should be given the job until the next World Cup. Like, I think he's the right coach for the job. I 100% do. But man, you know, you're just kind of getting into a sense of losing becoming a culture for this team. It's not good. You need to start winning games, especially against Australia, who you were pegged to beat in this game. Had to put them away. I honestly thought coming into this game, unless you won by plus 10 points against Australia, this was, you know, it's not good. It's not good enough. And that's unfortunately where we are. I feel bad for Tom Curry. You know, I think he's worked really hard to come back. He had an excellent game against New Zealand last week. And then he had his head injury today where he was out cold on the floor and it was not good. Everyone was a little bit worried within the stadium. I have to say Ben O'Keefe missed him on the floor. I think there's a clip of literally Ben O'Keefe walking past him and ignoring him and letting the play go on, even though he's out cold, which I thought was bad. But I have to say, counteracting that, other than that, I thought Ben O'Keefe had an excellent game at referee. But yeah, you know, he's just come back from his hip injury and now he's got this head injury and it just sucks. It kind of leads me on to my next point, is that Dombrandt came on for Tom Curry due to the head injury. It's just selection of the bench again, you know? I have nothing against Alex Dombrandt. I think for Quins, he's excellent. Like, he fully earns himself the opportunity to be within that England team because of how he plays with Quins, but it's never quite translated to England. He's never had those England performances that are shown within his Quins performances. Like, they don't translate. Every player within this team is like one performance away from England from having that and then understanding what they have to do every game to be at that level that they do at club level. I'm thinking specifically Ollie Lawrence has had that development. I'm thinking Will Stuart last weekend had that development. Another solid game from Stuart again today, by the way. If I'm England, I've got Sam Underhill, who's a complete proven talent. He should be on the bench. You know, you don't need another pure 8 on the bench. You've got Chandler, Cunningham-South, and you've got Earl, who can both play 8. And if you put on a pure open side in the form of Underhill, you can do some switcheroos. I mean, even Curry was the one that came off. But say, like, Earl gets injured, you know, Tom Curry could then move to 8, and then you could put Underhill at 7. I feel bad for Underhill. He's an excellent player. Like, he is, like, England's one true open side flanker that we have at the moment. Tom Curry, I think, does an excellent job of getting close to being what an open side flanker needs to be. At the same time, I'm feeling bad for Tom Curry. I think the coaching decision of not having Underhill on the bench, big deal as well. Don't know why he's not there. And speaking about coaching decisions about what's going on with the bench, George Ford on the bench again. A lot of pressure on his shoulders. Hadn't played rugby for 5 or 6 weeks prior to the New Zealand game last weekend. Put on the bench again to try and close out the win, or try and get a win because we were from behind. And again, doesn't play well. Again, I just feel like Borthwick is just forcing this game plan of George Ford on to close games. There is another excellent fly half that's English and has had an excellent 2 years for their club. He's in the squad and he can't get on the bench. Do I think if Finn Smith comes on with 60 minutes left at fly half that England will win the game? Not necessarily. But I at least think that Finn Smith has proved enough at Northampton level, winning the Premiership last year with them, again continuing that with great performances for Northampton this year. I definitely feel like this is an opportunity to be like, hey Finn, there's 20 minutes left, no one's taking control of this game, here's your opportunity. It's not like you're throwing him to the lion's den. You're not like throwing him against the South African defence that's just going to beat the crap out of him, you know? You're going to be putting him into an opportunity where he can come in and control the game like he does so well for Northampton. Yes, it's a step up. But I just feel like that's more progress than going back to George Ford to try and close out the game. It just doesn't feel right to me. I don't know where that decision-making is coming from. Well, I know where it's coming from. It's coming from Steve Borthwick. It doesn't feel like the right decision. We need to embrace the future, and Finn Smith is definitely the future. Finn Smith can't, like, wait for Marcus Smith to retire. I think he's like the same age, if not like a year or two younger than him. You need to be putting him on the pitch. George Ford's time's limited in this international shirt. I love him as a player. He's fantastic as a player. But come on, give it some context here. 6 week out injured, straight into 2 international games off the bench. And arguably his mistakes are the things that cost the game, you know? And I feel bad because he shouldn't be being put in that position in the first place. Finn Smith should be given his opportunity. He should be there. He should be on the pitch. A lot of negative there. I'm going to close out with a positive in the fact that, and I touched on it earlier, Suia's rugby union international debut for Australia was something special. Like, to come over from league and just instantly gel like that. You know, England had tried this many times, Sam Burgess, Andy Farrell, and it never really worked out properly. Jason Robinson is probably the one that did work out in a very major way. But to come in and have that kind of performance, like, he didn't get everything right. Like, defensively, sometimes, every now and again, he got caught out. But here's just his raw talent, his offloading ability and also, like, his footballing ability, making breaks, understanding the game and where the holes are. Like, he had a very, very good game. And I think if you're an Australian fan, you got a lot to be hopeful for. So, that's it for my review. I don't really know what England can do next week to change things. Again, I never thought that there was like a psychological thing going on with this England team. And I know a lot of other YouTubers have said that. I know pundits have said this, that it now is starting to feel like there is a psychological thing going on with England where they just can't close out a game. After this performance, I'm starting to feel that way too. It just feels like they don't know how to win. I don't think you need to be a sports person to understand. Like, sometimes you just get into a habit of like doing the right things and winning and getting better at whatever job you're doing. And then sometimes you can get into a bit of a hole where you just feel like you can't do anything right. And I just feel like that's where England are right now. They just don't feel like they can win. And I think best case scenario is next weekend they turn up and they play really well against South Africa, but I don't see them winning it. And then you've got another loss, and then you're playing Japan, and you know, anything other than like a blowout win would be a massive disappointment. And then you've got months until the Six Nations to ruminate what's going on, and it's not good. I think the only way that Borthwick gets England, the fan base, the whole of like the RFU, the whole of the team out of this funk is they need to pull it out of the bag next weekend against South Africa and win. Like, and they just need to like win the game. And I think if they do win next weekend, which I think is highly unlikely, they have a chance of just kind of quelling a lot of this bad juju that's going on with the team. Because I never thought that it was a thing, that there was a psychological thing going on. But the more time that goes on, the more games that they blow, that I just feel like, yeah, maybe it is a thing. Anyway, that's it for me this week. I'm going to be back next week. I'm going to be watching England-South Africa. Lucky enough to get tickets for that. And I'm probably going to try and get the video out straight away. So I'll see you in the next one.